All right, we're ready to start this evening's meeting. And we're going to start with welcoming everyone. We're glad you're here. To assure you that at some point later in the meeting, we will have time for public input, and public input will be limited to 3 minutes per person. We're here at the meeting of the Community Oversight Advisory Board. This board was put together as a part of the settlement agreement between the Department of Justice and the City of Portland. The responsibilities include the independently assessing the implementation of the settlement agreement, to make recommendations to the parties and the COAB on additional actions, to advise the Chief of Police and the Police Commissioner on strategies to improve community relations, to provide the community with information on the settlement agreement and its implementation, to contribute to the development and implementation of a Portland Police Bureau community engagement and outreach plan, and to receive public comments and concerns. So once again, welcome, and Mandy's going to give you some information on housekeeping.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. Can you hear me? Welcome. I just want to let folks know, and I'm sure if you've been here before, you've heard this, but just so that everyone is aware, we've got 3 entrances to this building. So if we should have an emergency, just know we've got an entrance here and one right there and one down a hallway in this direction. If you go down that hallway, you'll also find the restrooms. And I think the only other piece of housekeeping, no, 2 other pieces. It's something I just always need to say. I don't see any kids present, but we do have toys in the background should little ones show up and need to be occupied during the meeting. And then finally, and very importantly, we have Brad Taylor present this afternoon. He is our mental health specialist. He's right there in the back.
He's going to say something. Brad, please come forward and introduce yourself. Thanks, Mandy.
My name is Brad Taylor. I'm the mental health specialist with the City of Portland. And if you need anything, then check with me and I'll try to help you find the solution.
Thanks, Brad. The first order of business is to approve the minutes from the September 10th, 2015 meeting. You should all have received those minutes. Do I have any comment?
In regards to Commissioner Fritz's comment that was made, and my response to what was stated was not accurately portrayed in the minutes. The content of my comment that I made to Commissioner Fritz was that just because the officers have limited access to medical information or have not been to medical school, I made that comment in regards to her comment, so I just wanted to add that to the minutes.
Okay, so noted. Any other comments?
Thank you.
Can I get a motion to accept the minutes from that meeting? A second? Second is Jimmy? Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? The next order of business is the approval of the ground rules that you should have received at least a week ago. These were put together, initiated by comments from the Use of Force Subcommittee, and they were sent out to you, and you asked for your input. We incorporated, I think, almost everything that we got. Any comments? Can I get a motion to accept these ground rules as the rules by which we will operate as we meet? The second? All in favor? Opposed? Passed. Huh? Did Tom abstain? I don't know. Did you abstain, Tom? I'm sorry, thank you. An announcement. All of you may know by now that Sharon Maxwell has resigned. And I have heard from Senator Gordley that she would like to make a statement regarding the resignation letter.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. For the good of the order, I would like to make a statement for the record. Sharon Maxwell's resignation is a loss for the COAB. Her voice was, and hopefully will continue to be, an important correcting influence in this process. Ms. Maxwell rightly always questioned how COAB decision-making could be made more transparent to all of the people. In Ms. Maxwell's widely distributed resignation letter, she referenced my name and the perception that I have been disrespected in this process by Dr. Rosenbaum of the COAB team. That is an unfortunate misperception and misunderstanding on Ms. Maxwell's part, and it's not a matter we ever communicated about. I want it to be understood that my relationship with Dr. Rosenbaum from the beginning of our work has been, is mutually candid, respectful, and professional. In the days ahead, it is my hope that we will all use our words in a manner that does not harm the heart of any individual committed to this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Gordley. Moving on to the next agenda item. There are two proposals. The first one, 100815-1, is to add a second full COAB meeting to the existing meeting, increasing meetings to 2 per month to occur on the second and fourth Thursdays of each month. What's not included there is that I'm proposing this start in January. I warned you that this proposal was coming. Do we have any discussion? No discussion. Discussion. Rabbi Kahana. There was a move to close discussion, and now are you moving to accept the proposal? We hope.
No.
No?
I was about to discuss.
Okay, put your discussion out then.
I apologize, Phil. Thank you. I really have thought long about this proposal, and I know that everyone here is working very hard, and I think more hours than were anticipated. I'm concerned about having an additional meeting, and I believe that with some additional processing work, that we can use our time more efficiently than we have been, and I praise the chair on attempting to keep us to order. And I think that there is work that we can do. I'd like to try a little bit longer for us to maintain the one meeting before we move to adding a second meeting.
Rabbi Kahana, I'd like to respond to your comment. There are some presentations that have been put off for a total of 3 meetings, and other discussions regarding the police training we have put off because we haven't had enough time for that. I feel that we'll get farther and farther behind and have more delay for these very important discussions we should be having. So looking forward in the future, if we were to add an additional meeting, it would give us the ability to catch up. After we have that opportunity to catch up, maybe we could reevaluate and see if a second meeting is needed. But now we're falling very far behind, and I think it's time that we catch up and be able to have one meeting to vote on business items and another for presentations and informational presentations. And I think that that strategy of having one meeting thus far hasn't been successful. So that's my thoughts and my concerns about the topic.
Further discussion? Rabbi Kahana?
I'd just like to make two proposals. One is that as we're discussing the idea of retreat, that we think about the possibility of having some of the presentations that I agree are long delayed and part of the training as on the agenda of our retreat. And the second is, I'd like to just make I don't know if it needs to be a formal addition to this, but there is a requirement, I understand, for the number of meetings that we miss. And so if I'm correct about that, then I just simply ask that be doubled as a part of this proposal.
The requirement is that you not have unexcused. Now, unexcused just simply says, call us up and tell us that you won't be there. Okay. That you have a reason not to attend. Okay.
That's fine. Thank you.
And in terms of the retreat, I want to point out that we're having the same kind of problem of getting people together and getting a date upon which we can agree. I'm about to submit to you another proposal for how we do it. That'll be next week. All right. Yes? Jimmy?
I have a question for Rabbi Kahana. Will the retreat include the community? Do we plan on including the community in the retreat?
No. And
that's one of the problems that we're coming. When we discuss the police training, when we're discussing these presentations, I think it's important that the community is involved. In a retreat setting, it's more outside the community for us to have a retreat for ourselves, so that's something that we need to consider.
Okay. The chair will entertain a motion. So there's no agreement, there's no one who will move to add a second COAB meeting.
Second.
Okay. First is the motion is from Seattle, and the second is from Jimmy. What we're talking now about the second meeting, okay? Not the retreat. We're talking now about the second meeting. Jimmy.
Yeah, I want to comment on the second meeting. I understand the press, the time we're under, and just to get things done. And I'm okay personally with having a second meeting twice a month, but I'm thinking maybe the second meeting of the month maybe be an hour shorter than the 3 hours that we have here. Maybe we do a time compromise on some of that. So okay. Instead of having the 3 hours, maybe have it 2 hours or hour and a half or something like that. So, but I'm okay with having
I'll accept that as a friendly amendment to the proposal. Any other discussion? We have a motion on the floor that has also been seconded. Okay, so I'm ready to call for the vote. All in favor, please raise your paddles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 are in favor. All opposed, please raise your paddles. We have 2 opposed. All abstentions, please raise your paddle. All right, thank you. Similar but not the same. It passed. Yes, the motion passed, I'm sorry. A similar but, excuse me? 6-2, yes.
Were there abstentions?
No. No. This one is more, the next proposal is more specific. The recommendation is that COAB schedule a second meeting in November to accomplish the work of the COAB and prioritize scheduling items that require a vote for the regularly scheduled November meeting. Okay, this is submitted by the executive committee. Bud, would you like to speak to this?
I
guess where this comes from is mainly our perception that there is a ton of work to do between here and the end of the year. And especially you can see this surfacing, for instance, in the fact that we've delayed again the BHU presentation for this evening. If we don't do it now, it's just going to burden us next year.
Discussion? No discussion. Okay. Is there a motion on the floor? Can I get a motion to accept this proposal? Okay. Okay. So the motion is to schedule a second meeting in November to get some work done that needs to be done to meet some timelines. Okay. All in favor, please raise your paddle. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 in favor. All opposed? Oh, okay. Opposed? Abstentions? No opposition, no abstention. The motion passes. And you had your hand up.
The last COAB meeting, it was mentioned a few times, I think, by Paul Meyer and by Tasha Hager, or Lieutenant Hager, that the behavioral health unit and the training division has not had an opportunity to fully address the Community Oversight Advisory Board. And after reading parts of the draft quarterly report prepared by Dr. Rosenbaum and Watson, they seem to have a good understanding of it and actually found the Police Bureau to be in substantial compliance in this area of the behavioral health unit. So I think it'd be a worthwhile endeavor for the record that we actually add a presentation to this board by the behavioral health unit to the agenda. And that'd be, I'm interested to know, for everyone to know and the public to know what they've done, what they're doing, and what's yet to be done. So I'd like that to, I'd like to make a formal request for that to be an agenda item.
Thank you. We're working on that. I expect that we will be able to pull that off. Yes?
Wonderful, thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. I've been informed that V, one of our COAB board members, is watching. She's not able to attend tonight, and she is sending in her votes and comments to Amy via electronic messaging. Yes, Seattle.
Wanted to respond to specifically about the behavioral health unit. The executive committee did call out that agenda item specifically when we crafted the proposal to create the second meeting in November, and specifically said we would like to prioritize that. So
it's done. Okay, now we're moving into the recommendations from the Use of Force Committee, and we're going to take these one at a time. You've had them for a while and probably got a chance to look at them. I'm going to be pretty firm about time here. There are 9 of them. Okay, so I didn't calculate how many minutes that is, but it's less than 90. I mean, we've got 70 minutes to do this. Okay, so, huh? Amy says we're 5 minutes ahead of schedule. Don't tell them. So we've got 70 minutes to cover this next big giant piece of work. I would appreciate it if you did not repeat yourselves and if you were clear with your recommendations. The first one is recommendation on 344.05, bias-free policing. The PPB should rewrite Directive 344.05, bias-based policing / racial profiling prohibited. The amended directive should be identical to or consistent with the Seattle Police Department's bias-free policing policy, including its mission statement, its core principles, and its supporting policy statements. Proposals submitted by a 4-to-1 vote of the subcommittee. Okay? So, do you want to speak to it, Tom? Do you want to say more about that?
First of all, as the materials indicate, but the public may not be aware, we worked hard at contacting community groups and advocates to obtain their input and support to the extent it was there. We've received support from the Mental Health Association of Portland, a member of the Training Advisory Council and a board member of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, Portland Cop Watch, Disability Rights Oregon, individual community members, and most recently the Albino Ministerial Alliance Coalition for Police Reform and Justice. So there is a broad-based support for all 8 of the recommendations. Addressing the first recommendation, the Bureau has a policy that purports to protect protected classes, including people with mental illness, religion, politics, race, and so forth. What it does not do effectively is prohibit the use of these protected discernible characteristics like mental illness or race or religion to the extent that they should be. All that the current policy does is prohibit the use of that characteristic, such as mental illness, as the sole reason for taking police action. And clearly best practices demands that you not consider a personal characteristic such as mental illness or race as the sole reason for taking action, and that it only can be considered if it's part of information that you have, an officer has, about the particular suspect. So if you get a suspect description that has race in it, for example, then you can use race to consider whether you have grounds to make a stop or whatever the police action is. Seattle addresses that issue and makes it very clear. It's a DOJ-approved policy that you cannot use discernible, personal, identifiable characteristics such as race or mental illness or religion, political beliefs as a basis to take police action unless it's part of the suspect's description. So it's a serious step. It's a flaw in the current policy. Interestingly enough, the policy under Chief, I forget his name now, Foxworth, I believe, actually was similar or almost identical to the Seattle policy. So the recommendation is a step forward, an important step forward to try and prevent discrimination against classes of people and to prevent, in particular, racial profiling.
Any questions? Seattle.
I'd like to make a friendly amendment to change the language around discernible to actual or perceived. And particularly because it may not be discernible whether or not somebody is a woman or is a man, and that we should leave some room for the person or the suspect to define for themselves whether they are a man or a woman, and or if they are a transgender person or however they identify. And then and the term discernible appears several places, so I would move to change or make a friendly amendment to change discernible to actual or perceived in any of these cases, and to also add gender expression to both pages 3 and 9, where there's a list of a person's characteristics.
Tom?
I don't see that would present any problem, and it probably would improve the recommendation and the policy.
So you accept the amendment?
I don't have any problem with it unless someone else on the subcommittee does.
Doesn't look like it. Okay. Thank you, Seattle. Any more discussion? Excuse me? It would be on page, oh, where the language that she's referring to? See, Autumn, do you, the pages?
It's under recommendation 815-2, and it's specifically on page 3, the last paragraph, page 9 on number 3, and page 10 on number 4. So that's, are you finding it? Okay.
Okay. Any more discussion?
This recommendation.
Philip made the motion, Bud seconded. Any more discussion? All in favor of passing this proposal on? 3, 6, keep your paddles up, please. 9 in favor. Anyone opposed? Put your paddles down. No opposition. Anyone abstaining? The motion is passed. The next recommendation. The PPB should create a new directive regarding voluntary contacts. Terry stops and detentions. The new directive should be identical or consistent with the Seattle Police Department's directive on those topics. Proposals submitted by a 4-0 vote by the subcommittee. Tom, can you first tell us what a Terry stop is?
Terry stop is when an officer believes, based upon facts, objective facts and circumstances, that he or she has a reasonable suspicion to think someone has committed a crime or is in the process of committing a crime and therefore can make a stop.
Okay. Do you want to say more about this particular proposal?
I do. Briefly, again, it has the same broad support from the community. It is a natural outgrowth of efforts to prevent people from being contacted in voluntary situations, from being stopped and from being detained when it doesn't comport with the Constitution. There are limits on what officers can do in terms of stopping, interrogating, and so forth. And the Seattle policy is, in my opinion, state of the art in terms of addressing issues surrounding contacts and stops and detentions. And what the policy does, and it's the aim, I think, of a lot of the work that our subcommittee is doing, is try and explicitly define terms and situations that officers are involved with so they have direction on what they can do and not do, and so that their discretion is limited, appropriately limited. And what we believe this recommendation would do in terms of the policy would reduce contacts and stops, and in turn, what that ends up reducing is the use of force. And so we think it's an important recommendation, kind of as a follow-up to the bias-free policing recommendation that was just approved.
Discussion, questions? Can I get a motion? Discussion, any further discussion? Okay. All in favor of forwarding this recommendation, please raise your paddles. 3, 6, 9. All opposed? Abstentions. For the people in the audience, a lot of the work on these proposals is done at the subcommittee level. So what you're getting is the distillation of thought, and there is a packet that should give you some information on the pros and cons and the impact of these policies on, or these recommendations on policy or procedure. Okay. Sure, Dan. And it was a conscious decision, Dan, because of the number of proposals that we have. If you could hold yours until the public comment section and just give us, you know, your wonderful analysis of how things should go, I would appreciate that. I hear you. And I hear that is a very cumbersome approach right this minute, right in the middle of the meeting. What I think could happen is if you have something substantive, then I'm sure the committee will attend it and give it some consideration. I don't know that, Tom, you want to say something here?
Well, I think Dan has a valid concern, but I think we would certainly be receptive to a proposed amendment or a friendly amendment if somebody has that in mind.
Yeah.
But to be judicious, we should vote after.
I'm sorry.
Some more discussion? More discussion at the end there? Okay. Philip, then Bud, then Abel.
Yeah, in response to Dan and in regards to your concern and your suggestion, maybe with each vote for each recommendation after the discussion here, we can then turn it over to the community and see if there's any feedback from the community and then take our vote. Would you think that would be helpful?
I think it would really disrupt the agenda unless the comments are very limited and very short. Now, I understand what the purpose is because we've done this before. Part of pushing this through this time has to do with meeting timelines to ensure that these recommendations are included for consideration at other levels. More comment?
So, Dan, with all due respect to yourself and to COPWatch and the important and wonderful work that you do, my understanding of our process, at least, is that we have the opportunity for the public to join the work groups in DSU-FCS that are developing these recommendations, and then we further had quite robust discussion of these recommendations in subcommittee. We had 2 different meetings for that, and I think COPWatch may have been represented. So I think that COCL is on the right track in terms of trying to make this meeting expeditious.
And we always want to hear from the public. It's not about not wanting to hear from the public. It's about where the placement is tonight. And we can go back to trying the other method that I really liked also, to have comment after each proposal. Okay. Where were we? We have a motion. I'm sorry?
Just very briefly, I would just like to note that all of these recommendations are coming to us with unanimous recommendations from the committee, and I would also like to acknowledge that that committee is being excellently led by Mr. Steenson.
Yes, thank you for the hard work. Now, where were we? We were talking about number 2. Excuse me? The recommendation. And I lost in my papers here.
Yeah.
Number 4.
2, 3, 4.
I know.
The voluntary contacts, the Terry stops. Did we vote on that?
No, we're at the 4.
Pretext stops, number 4.
That's not in my, that's not my.
Yeah, I think we did.
Why doesn't it say there? The pretext stops. Okay. Mine is numbered different. Okay, mine says 4, I thought. The PPB should prohibit pretext stops. like to hear what a pretext stop is and why it might be used by the Portland Police Bureau and what the reasons are for this recommendation. Tom?
Pretext stop is typically a traffic stop. It can be a pedestrian stop, but a stop by an officer of an individual who may have committed some fairly minor offense, a traffic infraction. But the real reason that the officer is making the stop is to investigate potential criminal conduct or activity. But it's not a situation where the officer actually has reasonable suspicion of that kind of criminal activity. The reason the subcommittee proposed and approved this recommendation to prohibit pretext stops is that pretext stops have historically been criticized by people in the field as a way by which, unfortunately, officers racially profile. And in this city, we have stops data going back about 12 years that the Bureau's collected. The data consistently indicates that if you're an African-American driver compared to a white driver, you're 3 times as likely to be stopped. And that's consistent with the criticism that pretext stops contribute to that disparity. The Bureau is now collecting data on those perceived to be mentally ill in stops. And the data is not robust enough and has only been collected, I think, for a year or 2, I'm not sure exactly. So it's kind of hard to tell whether the mentally ill, for example, are being subjected to pretext stops. So in combination with the data and in combination with the city's 2009 plan to address racial profiling and the indication in the data that there is racial profiling, or at least there's a disparate impact resulting from officers stopping people by race in different proportions, we think it's an important recommendation. Now, the recommendation has received opposition. If I articulate it correctly, what I understand the opposition to be is pretext stops are legal, and it's true, they are legal. It's a legal tool that the police can employ. And secondly, the argument is made that it allows the police to more expeditiously find evidence and apprehend suspects. The problem being is it's a fishing expedition, that there is no criminal activity afoot that they're investigating, that they have evidence of. It's really, it's a hunch. And so the subcommittee unanimously believes that given the history of what looks to be disparate impacts in terms of how races are treated in this city, that prohibiting pretext stops would be a step in the right direction to address that problem.
Is there anybody else who wants to speak on this? Yeah, Tasha.
So just listening to the conversation, and I will say I'm not part of this subcommittee, so I don't get to listen to the whole thing, but in the last couple of things that I'm looking at in reducing contacts and stops, I think it's important for the community to understand the impact that will have. I mean, you could make a rule that the police just don't contact and stop anybody, and they would follow that rule, but there is an impact to that. And I think that when you look at pretext stops, and I will give you a good example of where that comes into play, that it's not a fishing expedition, it's a tool that police use. So anybody who's lived in this town knows that about once a year we have somebody who likes to start a tire slashing spree. And those kinds of incidents, they don't get solved because we have a magic somewhere that tells us who it is. They get solved because cops go out and they find reasons to stop people who are in that neighborhood, even if they're minor minor traffic violations or minor ped to cigs or all those things to find out who's out and about, and eventually through that kind of work and good investigation have narrowed down and solved some of those. And the last one, there were, I don't know, what, 300, 400, 500 tire slashing. So, and that's just one example of how police use pretext stops to actually deal with neighborhood problems. Another big one would be drug houses in the neighborhood where officers will work that neighborhood, and if you want to call it a fishing expedition, I guess you could call it a fishing expedition, but it's targeted to try and solve a neighborhood issue. It's not just about the police going out and doing things arbitrarily. They use this as a tool to actually help neighborhoods. So I think there should be some caution as we move forward and look at what rules are we putting in place and what are the unintended consequences of some of the decisions of these recommendations. Because you could take the ability away from police to make stops, and the unintended consequences that they will have a harder time coming back and solving some of these issues.
Other comments? Raise your paddle, please. Yes, go ahead, Vince.
I worked in the community for many years. And specifically, I worked for many years on the gang unit. And pretext of stops, I worked with some of the officers sitting out here watching us right now, Captain Marshman and others. And if the community decides that you don't want me to stop an individual in an area that I've gotten information from neighbors and so forth, for that traffic stop that leads me to that weapon that's been involved in a drive-by shooting, you have to be very careful of the unexpected consequences of this environment, because I've worked in that environment. I worked out here in this community for many, many years. So we should take very much consideration as we look at this and the impact on the community. And it's not a fishing expedition. For me, I have information that's given to me by many people that I see on a day-to-day basis when I was working a district, and you know everyone in your community. And when they knew you, they give you information. And when there's an issue, they make you aware of the things that you should be looking for. And at that point in time, if I don't have anything else and I have a traffic stop that I can make, I make that traffic stop. And if that leads me to other environments where I have reasonable suspicion that this person is the individual that everyone in the community is telling me is a person that's involved in this activity, I think that you as a community want me to address that. Because that's led me to, and I could go on about the story, so I've been around for 25 years, so there's many. But the most important part is like individuals like Edna Robinson from the Neighborhood Association were the individuals that taught me how to go out and do this. You need to talk to these individuals for this reason. And every wasn't a pretext stop. Sometimes it was, hey, how you doing? Can I talk to you for a second? And they knew that they could leave, but they didn't. Because in most cases, they didn't have any idea that I was looking for specific things and that I had additional information. So it's not a fishing expedition, Tom, when I have the community give me the information so I can go forward.
Okay, I've got a hand here from Amy, and then from Philip, and then from Senator Gordley.
I'm sorry. I guess I'm confused. And so I'm going to ask a bit of a question and make a bit of a statement. I'm confused because as far as I read this recommendation is that it wouldn't actually stop the police from stopping people who are actually committing a crime, right? So if I'm driving down the street and I'm speeding and I'm going like 60 in a 30-mile-per-hour zone, you can still stop me because I've actually committed a crime, right? And then if I have weapons in my car and you have pulled me over, you can find those weapons. So my confusion comes from the idea that it is sort of being presented as all or nothing. That if we get rid of the possibility of stopping people on minor issues because you're actually looking for something else, so the reason that you're stopping is because you're looking for something else, that's the pretext, right? Then we are also getting rid of your ability to just do your job, which is to stop people who are committing a crime. I'm not sure that that all or nothing thinking is actually here. So I guess for the police officers here, if you could speak to why you see that as all or nothing, that would be helpful. That being said, that's sort of my question. And then my comment is, I have lived in a neighborhood that was sort of designated to stop sex work and sex trafficking in my teen years. And during that time, I was pulled over 5 times, mostly because I was in the car with a white driver. So the assumption was that I was a sex worker because I was young and I was in the neighborhood. I was stopped on pretext. I have not been a sex worker, right? So I want to be very clear that as we talk about the ways that pretext stops are helpful or have been helpful in your lived experience as police officers, that we also keep in mind that members of the community who have not committed any crime are consistently being harassed. That's what it feels like, even if that's not the intention. Are being harassed, are being stopped, and are in fact left with PTSD from those encounters, and that actually increases the animosity and disconnect between police officers and the people in the communities they serve. And I think that that's what this is supposed to be getting at. So maybe we can figure out, where the disconnect is and how you see it, and try and reach some agreement about how to serve everyone.
On my list, I have Philip, Abel, Tasha, and then a question from V, and then we're going to wrap it up and vote. So, Philip?
Okay, so I'll keep it brief. For those pretext stops, to say why they're important is because it's helping the community and helping the serve the community. But it's the fact that the statistics are showing a disparity there for stopping people for no reason, and it shows a clear disparity that it's specifically targeting a certain group of people. So using it as a helpful tool isn't the issue, it's the disparity that's the issue, and I think that's where we're feeling that there's no reason behind that happening. And I understand if somebody's breaking the law, doing a criminal activity, that makes sense. That's not picking on them. But it's been a history of this and that disparity. So I'm just saying we don't want to excuse the statistics behind it.
Question for Tom. Tom, how does the Seattle Police Department address pretext stops? We seem to be looking to them and other places for best practices.
Actually, the state of Washington's Constitution has been interpreted to prohibit pretext stops. So the entire state of Washington and all its law enforcement agencies operate daily without having the ability to conduct pretext stops. And frankly, I haven't heard that it presents any serious problems, but I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Tasha?
So I just wanted to respond to your question. It's not really about an all or nothing. Certainly if you're speeding down the street, an officer would have the right to pull you over. It's not a crime, but it's still an infraction. The issue is that doesn't solve the crimes that are occurring in a neighborhood, because typically speeders are not the ones out that are doing burglaries and doing, the tire slashing or buying or selling drugs or all those kinds of neighborhood nuisance things. So the point is that police officers use the speeding to stop and talk to people. And I'll just give you a quick analogy. Not everybody getting on an airplane has a bomb in their shoes, but we all take our shoes off to stop the one who does. So yes, occasionally, not occasionally, many times, I've stopped people. I had a gentleman who told me about a drug problem in his neighborhood. I was his district officer. I promised him I would work that neighborhood. And 2 weeks later, guess who I pulled over? Him. And it was an unsignaled turn. It was no reason, but at 2 o'clock in the morning, a car turned off. It caught my attention. He happened to be driving, and he and I had another nice long conversation. I sent him on his way, not even with a warning, because I told him why I pulled him over. But those are the kind of things that police officers use to address those issues. So I hope that answers your question. It's not an all or nothing, it's just a tool.
Okay, I'm going to read a question from Lee. I see Vince, but I'm about to cut everybody off. I'm going to read, I can't hear you. Well, if you push me, but I'm going to push back. Now remember, you all gave me a lot of power last time. Okay. V had a question. I'm going to try to read it the way that I read it. Is there a difference between a pretext stop and an investigation procedure? Does this recommendation limit an investigation procedure? Is there anybody who can answer those questions for me? Tom?
This recommendation prohibits a very specific type of stop. It does not prohibit Terry stops. In other words, if officers have reasonable suspicion that someone's involved in criminal activity or has committed a crime, they can make the stop. If they have probable cause to believe a crime has been committed, they can make the stop or make the arrest. So it doesn't limit those more typical activities, but it limits this specific type of stop, a pretext stop. And let me say one more thing. Although the Bureau doesn't collect data on pretext stops, the stops data, besides indicating, for example, that African Americans are stopped 3 times as often as white drivers, they then are searched 3 times, roughly 3 times as often as white drivers for one reason or another. And then less contraband is found on the African American drivers than the white drivers. And again, the subcommittee is just trying to take a step in the right direction, we think, and have recommended this particular approach to try and stem the tide of, it may not be intentional racial profiling, I don't know, but there's a disparate impact that's occurring, and the statistics don't lie about it, and we think it should be stopped, and this is an effort to try and stop it.
Okay, I will allow Vince. You got 1 minute, and then we're going to vote.
1 minute, 30 seconds, sorry. Amy, when you talked about your experiences, I think when you look at the first contact, what happened before and then after, and I'm so sorry that it happened to you, but did the officer or whoever stopped, the individuals that stopped you, could have been a sergeant, so forth, did they explain to you why they were making the stop?
I can tell you that I was told that the driver was speeding. I was told that the driver was driving erratically when in fact they were not. I was told a light was out when a light was not out. And in at least one case, I had the officer run his flashlight up and down my entire body, ask for my ID, and ask me to get out so that he could pat me down.
But no one explained to you why they were making the stop, as they were looking for sex offender, those environments, nothing.
No.
And I feel that that's a missed opportunity.
And I wasn't driving either, so
I
in
understand
all of
that.
those cases,
Yes,
they shouldn't have been asking me any questions, right?
I understand. I just wanted to get the complete story on that. Thank you.
Okay. The recommendation that's before us, before you, is that the PPB should prohibit pretext stops. Can I get a motion? Motion to approve by Bud, seconded by Abel. All in favor, please raise your paddles. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Or did I? Sharon, did you raise your pen? Opposed?
Abstain.
Opposed is 1. And abstained? Is Sharon. Yeah, Sharon Marion. Okay. The proposal passes. The next one is If the one that we just discussed doesn't go through, the Portland Police Bureau should collect stops data on pretext stops. Again, Tom, as chair of that committee, I'd like for you to say what the intent was here.
Well, the COAB can make recommendations, obviously, but it can't implement or enact policy. And so depending on what the DOJ and the city decide to do, or what the city may decide to do on its own, if the prohibition on pretext stops is not enacted, then the subcommittee thinks that data should be collected on that to determine whether those pretext stops that are occurring on some disparate basis. In other words, there's apparent discrimination in how those pretext stops are being conducted. There's no opposition to the collection of the data. In fact, it was a proposal that's also been discussed in front of the Community Police Relations Committee, and I think even officers on that committee have supported, or at least supported the idea of collecting that data.
Discussion, Sharon?
I just wanted to raise a question that I have regarding the pretext stops, and I think just given the scope of our work with the COAB and what a vast amount of stuff we have to do, I think it's really important that with all recommendations we tie it back to what the overall mission is of the COAB and how it directly addresses the settlement agreement proposal. So we're addressing use of force against individuals with mental health crises. This is why I abstained. I totally agree. I think there's a lot of stuff to delve into regarding pretext stops, and I think that's a very important conversation. My question is, does this directly tie into our work as the COAB in terms of addressing use of force against individuals with mental health crises or perceived mental health crises? This seems to be a different issue to me.
DOJ specifically has identified Directive 34405, the biased policing and bias-based policing, racial profiling prohibited, as a directive that it wants input from by the COAB and the COCO. The settlement agreement also refers to the 2009 racial profiling plan that the PPP has, that quite frankly has been ineffective. It's done nothing to change the numbers in the last 5 or 6 years. And so what the subcommittee believes is an outgrowth of looking at the racial profiling plan and looking at the bias-based policing, racial profiling prohibited directive, that prohibiting pretext stops and some of the other recommendations is a way to address holes, so to speak, in those policies that aren't preventing racial profiling.
You can just refer to 2 here on under 7 of the pros.
Siadam, then Bud.
I also think that the growing evidence that racial bias leads to negative mental and behavioral health outcomes is also very important to consider in our conversation as well.
Just clarification. So what specific? I mean, I'm very, very curious. What specific bias by whom and what specific outcomes?
That discrimination in general can lead to negative mental and behavioral health outcomes for individuals of color.
Okay.
Bud, and then Philip.
So, 2 things just on process for recommendations. I think I heard the very valid piece of feedback that it would be good to better call out in future recommendations how those recommendations relates to the settlement agreement. Right now, though, I do want to point out that each of the recommendations does contain a section beginning with R-E, colon, and then list paragraphs to which that recommendation relates. From this feedback that we're hearing, it sounds like there's the opportunity to improve that, and my recommendation would be that you know, that's a conversation that we should all have with COAB, and that's a great opportunity we should definitely pursue.
That's fine. I just want to point out that we do include the areas of responsibility that the COAB has on the second page of the proposal sheet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So if you want something more specific, we can do that too. All right. Any more hands? Any more discussion? If the pretext stops are not prohibited, the PPB should collect stops data on pretext stops. Can I have a motion? Bud and Abel. All in favor, please raise your paddles. 3, 6, 8, 9. All opposed? Abstentions? Wait, did I get you? Okay, so 10. 10. Well, we're getting through 'em. The next one. The Portland Police Bureau should collect stops data by individual officers and specialty units, such as the gang enforcement team and any hotspots policing units or teams. Hotspots policing units or teams. Can we hear from you on that one, Tom?
The community has been speaking out about primarily racial profiling because that's where the data has been. They haven't collected data on other categories of protected classes like mental illness. In the mid-2000s, there were a series of community meetings that led to the development of the PPB's 2009 racial profiling plan under Chief Sizer's tenure. One of the recommendations that the community came up with is that we, the PPB, should be collecting data on individual officers and their stops and searches and whether or not they're being successful in finding contraband to sort of drill down and determine whether or not there might be implicit bias or outliers if you start to examine the conduct of individual officers. There was opposition from the members of the Bureau, particularly the Portland Police Association, the Union for Officers and Sergeants, over the issue of if they collect the data, it can become a public record and therefore the public may access the names of officers who may be looking to stop in disparate proportions. And they raised a safety issue. And where it got left was there should be some legislation or something should happen so that you can get down to this individual level to determine whether officers individually are disproportionately stopping people of different races. It's gone nowhere. The Bureau's done nothing to pursue the legislation. The legislation hasn't been proposed. It's gone nowhere. So the Bureau is not collecting that kind of data, either on individual officers or on specialty units, such as the gang enforcement team or hotspots policing units. Although the Bureau has an employee information system that is supposed to monitor the performance of officers and sort of provide early intervention when there are problems with force, for example, they don't have a system in place because they're not collecting the data individually to similarly conduct early intervention and preventive measures if officers are disproportionately stopping people. And part of the hope of the subcommittee is if it's individual officers, there's counseling, there's training, there's supervisory kinds of things that can be done, management tools that can address the problem. But unless you identify who those individual officers are in some way, then you can't manage you can't manage those people and address the problem. The subcommittee is not insensitive to this risk or this claim of risk if individual officers are identified. But it seems to us there has to be some way around that. There has to, must be some way to do it. And it seems like such an important thing to do that the Bureau isn't doing, again, to address racial profiling. So we are again urging, this time as the COAB, or hoping the COAB will approve this recommendation to collect that data.
Abel and then Rabbi Kahana.
Know if Mike Marshman has a comment on this recommendation, or if you would comment on the recommendation.
Short. Good evening, Mike Marshman. I don't know how to comment without getting super deep into the woods on data and data collection, all those kinds of issues. I know we have looked at collecting data on different work unit groups. For example, I'll preface it with this. Let's say, the gang unit. They're going to go out and stop individuals suspected of or being involved in gangs. I don't know how the numbers, if they're focusing on African American gangs or Eastern Bloc gangs, you're gonna work the folks and get to know the folks that you're investigating. So I don't know how you would set a logical boundary, if you will, or benchmark for when does it become disparate or not. So it's conversations we're talking about. It's something I think it's worthy to discuss, but it's hard to do it in this format. Does that make sense?
The conversations that you're having, who are the parties to the conversation that you're having?
Various inside a bureau, obviously, and then various community groups that we work with, like the Slavic community. There's different community stakeholders that we're working with. The part that I kind of do on my division is more the technical, how do you collect the data side and make valid data and get reliable information that way. It's just a broader conversation that I do agree needs to occur. There's so much information to have. You can have this conversation for hours, and that's not how you accomplish it right here, right now. Yeah, so I feel like I'm not answering your question to satisfaction.
I think what I'm really trying to get at is some sense of what the commitment is to deal with the issue. The Bureau's commitment to deal with the issue.
I think the Bureau's commitment, I can't speak for the chief, but I feel comfortable in stating it that the chief is highly committed to this. I think the Bureau is as well. And all kinds of data collection for data-driven decision making. I mean, we need to know it as well.
Sorry to put you on the spot, but you are in the room. Thank you.
Thanks.
Rabbi Kahana.
Was similar, and I almost had it answered. But can you? We addressed negative impacts. Are you suggesting that a negative impact of this proposal would be that officers would be spending too much time trying to recreate their experiences and record it as data?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm always looking for efficient ways to collect data, so that's not a cumbersome process. It could be a cumbersome process, but the actual manipulation of work to collect data shouldn't be a barrier to getting these things accomplished.
Thank you.
Tom?
Just briefly. The Bureau has a template that in the computer program that officers have that they complete after they make stops, and it addresses gender, race, the reason for the stop. There's must be a dozen fields, or maybe 15 fields, and all that this recommendation is about is when those officers are inputting the information, that there also is a field, and that information is collected then by individual officers in the unit. So it's not. I don't think it's not much of an additional data process. It's just collecting it by that additional field.
Sorry, what's the additional field?
By individual officer.
By individual officer.
Yeah.
That's not collected?
It's not. No.
Thank you.
Philip? Then you're the last one, Philip.
Just some food for thought. for us to discuss each recommendation. We have all had an opportunity to read the recommendations before this meeting and use the community forum to discuss. But from what I've observed, there hasn't been any discussion about this recommendation until we've gotten here tonight, and now it seems we're discussing it. So I'm just curious why we haven't taken an opportunity to use the website and the forum to discuss this if we have individual concerns that need to be addressed or individual questions. I envision this going quickly and voting, and so that's just my opinion that I wanted to put out there. A second point I wanted to make is that I think it's very important to have documentation and data. There's no question about it. With that said, I would like to move to approve this recommendation.
Can I get a second? You got 2 seconds down here. All in favor of sending this recommendation forward, please raise your paddles so we can see them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All opposed? Abstentions? Jimmy abstained. The measure has passed. The recommendation has passed. The next one is from the same committee. The PPB should collect data on non-custodial, consensual investigatory interviews. And Tom, it would be helpful if you would give us definitions for those words.
There are, and it's the Seattle Police Department policy that was part of the second recommendation that was approved today addresses this. There are essentially 2 types of non-Terry stops. Again, we're not talking about where there's reasonable suspicion to make a stop. We're talking about, and it often occurs on the street, more of a pedestrian situation, where one contact might be as minimal as, saw you playing softball, nice job, talked to your mother yesterday, how you doing? And that has nothing to do with investigation of anything. It may be part of community policing to have contact with people, but it's not an investigation. The other kind of contact is where the officer makes the contact and what he or she wants to do is investigate. And so it includes things such as asking questions, asking for consent searches, things of that sort, clearly designed to investigate. And so it's non-custodial in the sense the person is free to leave, and it's consensual in the sense that the person doesn't have to answer the questions about whatever is being asked and doesn't have to consent to a search. So the recommendation is, because the community is concerned, that's another place where people, for various reasons, how they look, what their race is, mental illness, are being subjected to disparate treatment by the police. And there's no data on that. This was an issue that was brought up at the Community Police Relations Committee, and I think generally it was supported by the members of that committee, including officers, and I don't think there's been any objection to this recommendation.
Questions, discussion? Michelle.
So I had a conversation with Sergeant Greg Stewart earlier today, and he sent me an email that he would like for me to read. He wished he could be here tonight, but he can't. And it's kind of regarding parts of this that he was quoted as saying. So I'm going to read you this email. It says, "Dear COAB, I was just reviewing the COAB recommendation 100815-7 and wish to voice my concern regarding this recommendation. In the pro section of the recommendations, I am quoted as saying, PPB Sergeant Greg Stewart estimates that there are probably 6,000 to 10,000 such investigatory interviews each year for which no data is collected. The recommendation, by being listed in the pro section, is disingenuous. Furthermore, it is disingenuous to say that the DSUFCS has not been informed of potential cons to this idea. The quote attributed to me was from a July 15th Community Police Relations meeting. Tom Steenson, a member of the DSUFCS, was present at this meeting, and the meeting is referenced in the resolution. I'm disturbed that this quote is attributed to me in such a way as to infer that I was in support of this motion. I am equally disturbed that the motion says the DSUFCS was unaware of any cons. At the CPRC meeting referenced, I advised against the inclusion of investigatory stops, mere conversation, or other similarly ambiguous and subjective standards into the Portland Police Bureau stops data collection. I provided this advice based on my experience analyzing this data and provided the following reasons against altering our current forms. 1, ambiguity. In the past, we have utilized ambiguous standards for our data collection, and this has led to poor quality data. The STOP standard currently used as the metric for collecting data provides an objective standard known prior to the contact by the officer initiating the contact by which to measure the activity. It has a legal definition which has been trained on extensively and clearly understood by the officer collecting the data. This objective universal standard allows for the data to be analyzed and measured across units, divisions, departments, etc., and allows for us to compare data over time. In contrast, there is no clear definition for investigative contact, no legal standard by which to measure it, and no training on what it is. The implementation of a process including new language would undoubtedly lead to a wide variety of mistakes, ultimately leading to very poor quality data. Number 2, additional training. This lack of training will create a need to create and train the entire department on a new standard. Given the current demands on our training division, this requirement will likely result in the reduction of equally important training. We will have less time to provide scenario trainings, especially important given to the changes to our force policy, which need to be ingrained via scenario training, equity training, training designed to maintain skills such as communication, driving, and other core competencies. Furthermore, we are currently suffering a staffing shortage, which means that simply providing more training is difficult or impossible. Number 3, time to analyze the data. I have been conducting the STOPS data analysis for several years, and during that time, we have not been able to consistently analyze the STOPS data in a timely manner. With the demands of the DOJ settlement agreement, we have added analysts and are going to, for the first time in years, be able to provide STOPS data analysis in the calendar year, i.e. we will provide the STOPS data for 2014 and 2015 and not be 1 or more years delayed. I would propose that developing an effective method to utilize the data we currently analyze and collect would be more beneficial than simply collecting more data points. Number 4, data collection fatigue.
Excuse me, Michelle, how much more of that is there?
Paragraph.
Okay.
And a half. Sorry, second page. Number 4, data collection fatigue. In the last 2 years, we have introduced hundreds of new data points to be trained on, collected, analyzed, and hopefully utilized to improve decision making. We have also changed our crime data collection from the relatively simple uniform crime reporting system to the incident-based crime reporting system. This change has resulted in a dramatic increase in the time it takes to conduct reports, on exponential growth in the number of data points collected, and an incredible fatigue on the part of the officers entering this data. As a person who professionally collects and analyzes data, I realize that simply asking for more and more data points leads to the degradation of the quality of data collected. It is quite simply a fact that at some point, less is more. This means that collecting fewer data points but having the accuracy of those data points be of sufficiently high quality to guide decision making is more valuable than simply collecting everything at the cost of reduced data. Finally, I am disappointed in how the arguments for the collection of investigatory contacts has been presented to the public. I have worked diligently on this issue and have presented at numerous community meetings and other venues. During those events, I have always attempted to be open, transparent, and honest with the public. I believe that the COAB also strives to offer the public the same degree of honesty and transparency. This resolution is not consistent with those standards. Sincerely, Greg Stewart. And I would suggest that if you have any questions for him, I mean, he's the person that does all this, that I would definitely post it on the forum, because he's reading the forum. This is where he got this information from, and I believe posted to this.
Okay. Bud?
I'd like
Oh,
to.
excuse me. Michelle, I'd like to have a copy of that for our records, please. Could we have a copy of that for our records? Thank you. Bud?
I'd like to propose a friendly amendment, which would be that in the section pros, that the second and third paragraphs be struck, and that under cons, the full text of Sergeant Stewart's objections be read in.
That's directed at the chair for the committee. Yeah.
Oh, I have no opposition. I just do want to say that when I listed what Greg Stewart said about the numbers that he expected that there would need to be data collected for the 6 to 10,000, that was the only purpose. I did not intend, if I misled anyone, I apologize. I did not intend to suggest that Sergeant Stewart supported the collection of that data. I also do not recall much, if any, of what he just said, but I don't dispute that he may have those opinions about the appropriateness of collecting the data, but I think the subcommittee stands by its recommendation.
But you accept the friendly amendment?
Yes.
To have, okay. All right. Any more discussion? You have a motion from Philip, a second I need from Bud. All in favor of this proposal, please raise your paddles. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All opposed? What? You didn't see them? Okay. Raise your paddles again, please. We have Sharon, Alicia, Tom, Seatum, Rabbi, Jimmy, Philip, Abel, and Bud. How many is that? Isn't that? It's 9, that's what I said. Okay, thank you. All opposed? Abstentions? Amy abstains. The motion is passed. Well, we're going to try to do the rest of these in about 10 minutes. Okay, so we're going to. The next one is the Portland Police Bureau should advise persons subjected to a non-custodial consensual interview in writing that they have the right not to answer questions and the right to leave at any time without being subjected to any adverse consequences. Why is this proposal necessary, Tom? Or why have you proposed this?
Well, again, the community has expressed concern about these investigatory interviews usually occurring on the street. Again, it's got the broad support of the individuals and groups, including the MAC coalition that I mentioned before. It's important because most people don't understand that when an officer doesn't have reasonable suspicion or probable cause about criminal activity that you're involved with, when he or she is asking questions, you have the right just to say, I don't want to talk to you. And you have a right to say, I don't want to stay, I'm going to leave. But what we hear are reports from people, it happens with mentally ill people consistently, they don't understand. It happens with racial minorities who are intimidated or feel harassed, that they either don't understand their rights or they agree to stay. And it's embarrassing, to be standing on the street and being questioned by the police and being subjected to a search. And people should know, we believe, they should know that they have a right to refuse to participate in that interview and to walk away, and there won't be consequences.
Thank you. Discussion. Rabbi Kahana.
I'd like to understand the practicality. How will this written information be given?
Essentially be a rights card, so to speak, probably a postcard size thing. And it would, in writing, advise them of in essence, what this recommendation says and provide a place for the person to sign if they want to sign and agree to stay, or at least they'll understand they can walk away and there aren't consequences.
And is there a reason that can't be given verbally?
Well, it isn't done verbally because what officers want to do is get people to talk. And so they don't, at least in the complaints I hear is that people say, we weren't told we could walk away, we weren't told we could not answer questions, we weren't told that something wouldn't happen to us if we said no.
So you're saying that you want to document that the information was given?
Yes. And it's a requirement. I mean, the recommendation is it's a requirement that it be given. Again, these people are not suspected of a crime. These are just people living their lives in the community, and they should know about their rights.
Further discussion?
Members have any comments on this proposal?
I'll comment. Just at first blush on this, there's a lot of things that we've changed over the years as far as how we educate the public, and some of it is the responsibility of officers to educate the public on what we do and how we do it, and I think that officers, we often have trained and do continue to train at times that you do tell somebody they have the right to walk away. They are not being stopped. They are free to leave. We have changed the way we stand. We've changed the way we've parked our cars, all to stop people from feeling that they don't have the right to leave. So I think that this is probably just a little, one more step. I'm not really sure how it's going to lead to any more confidence if the feeling is that we don't already do that. How getting a signature on a piece of paper is going to make people feel more confident that that's occurring. I'm not sure where that disconnect is. I think that this particular piece comes back to more about the community-police relationship and not about the police educating the community on their right not to speak to the police if they don't want to. I mean, we have a lot of conversations about how you talk to somebody in a mere conversation and the tone you use and the words you use. There's a lot of training that goes into that. So I would argue that your ability to leave it may not always be clear, but it is clear much of the time.
And how about,
one more thing. And we do have a policy that requires identification with business cards. And so, I mean, there's a lot of things processes that have changed over time in contacts with people, that some of that, the police just show up and make people feel intimidated and do what they want them to do. That's old policing, and we're into new policing, so.
Philip, and then I'm going to read a statement from V, and then we're going to vote on this proposal.
So in response to Tasha,
okay, I'm sorry.
I have some experience. I've had experiences with the police over years, and I've lived all across America. But in Portland specifically, I've been given a card by some police, and some haven't. I've had to request that from them if I needed to file a complaint against a police officer. So your experience and my experience are different. You're an officer and I'm a community member, and I think that our perspectives are different, and that's important to remember. And as far as trust is broken, so I'm not, if you make that a requirement for the officers to let people know, let them aware of their rights, I think the community will feel more confident and safer, and it won't, if you don't let anybody know about their rights, that's something that I think we should document it, and it should be required so people are being made aware.
Okay, I saw two more hands. I'd like to have no more than 1 minute each from you, Sharon and Seattle.
I would just question, this thing seems like it would actually potentially benefit the police as well, because I believe you when you're saying you provided this information, and having this kind of written document, but people are saying, no, I didn't get it, and it's like discharge instructions from the hospital. Like we tell the information, we sit down, we go over it, we provide the written thing, we sign it, and all the studies show that patients say, no one told me what I'm supposed to do. And so there's different perceptions, and that information is important, but this card would sort of be at least physical, some sort of showing that the information was given both for the benefit of the community and for the benefit of the police. I think it's...
Okay. Seattle.
Additionally, I think that this is a reasonable response to reconcile a historical and generational systemic context of ableism, racism, heterosexism that we see from the data. And so I support it for those reasons.
And from our absent COAB member, V, as a matter of conversation, if a person who may have mental illness or experiencing a mental illness crisis is stopped, they may or may not have situational awareness, and being given notification is critical to the people who are the named aggrieved parties in the settlement agreement. A signature or notification in writing goes to the point of legitimacy. This is in response to Lieutenant Hager. Okay. So we have a proposal before us. Can I get a motion for acceptance? Bud? Second, Abel. All in favor, please raise your paddles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 9. Sorry. Is it 10? Okay. I can't count. Opposed? Abstentions? Rabbi abstained? Okay. Passed. Last one. The PPB should prohibit consent searches. If consent searches are not prohibited, the PPB should require its officers to use written forms for consensual searches signed by the person being searched in advance of the search, which contains advice to the person about the right to refuse to consent without being subjected to any adverse consequences. Do we need clarification on what that is? Want to say something, Tom?
Again, this is not a situation where an officer has a probable cause to conduct a search. It's not a situation where the officer, because of safety concerns, has to pat down someone for weapons. This is the situation where there's no basis to conduct the search, to force the search, and the officer asks for consent. It's another area where the critics have weighed in and found that it's abused by the police in the sense that it leads to disparity in who's searched. And the Portland Police stops data that I mentioned earlier evidences that. Once stopped, African Americans compared to white drivers are 3 times as likely to be searched. And despite those searches, less contraband is found. So not only is it an invasion, I think, of people's rights, but it seems like a waste of police resources when they're conducting consent searches and producing poor results. The results are worse, even though they're conducting it disproportionately. It's also been It's also been an issue that's been addressed in many law enforcement agencies and jurisdictions throughout the country. And I don't purport to have a complete list. The Oregon ACLU helped me, but in the materials, I think there's 10 or 12 or 15 different agencies or jurisdictions that have prohibited consent searches because...
What exactly is a consent search?
I want to search your backpack. Do you mind?
So if I say yes, that's a consent search?
That's a consent search.
But, yeah, okay.
But you have a right to say no.
Yes.
And so, again, as a way to combat what the data that's been collected, evidences in Portland, like it does throughout the country, that consent searches should be prohibited.
Discussion. Rabbi Kahana.
I'd like to hear from the officers in the room on the use of the value of consent searches.
Police advisors, you want to speak up? Yeah.
Since I seem to be speaking a lot tonight, I'll certainly talk about the value of consent. Much of everything that we're talking about tonight is really all tied together, from pretext stop to consent searches, and it's all about being proactive, doing proactive policing and trying to solve neighborhood issues. And then many of these, from my perception, many of these are things that are, quite honestly, at some point probably going to be seen as barriers by officers trying to do their job. Consent searches have been a valuable tool because many people, and I know it seems contrary to what you would think, but many people will consent to a search even if they know they have something on them they shouldn't have. And over the course of my career, I've done tons of consent searches, although I've done tons of other searches based on reasonable suspicion and probable cause also. So, you know, it's just another tool that officers use, and sometimes getting the answer no gives you an answer to a question you have. You know, I guess I'll be repetitive, but it's a tool that's used and been very successful.
Jimmy?
Searches is that if a police officer pulls a person over and asks, can I search your backpack or can I search your vehicle? Now that person is going to be nervous and afraid and going to think that he or she has to say, yes, you can search, or else they would maybe go into jail. So a consent search is almost not a consent search because the person being asking for consent is thinking that he or she is being told that they have to abide by what the officer is asking. When the officer knows that he or she is asking for consent, the person being asked to consent is saying, hey, I'm being told to consent. So therefore, it makes consent searching tough, and so I can't go with that. And just add a little further, what we talked about earlier was the letting police officers letting citizens know their responsibilities and rights, and let them know that they can or can't do certain things or walk away if they're okay to walk away. They have a right to do that. That's another educational piece, and that piece there is really, really good as it relates to the settlement agreement because it builds trust and it builds community relations with the police as well as the community. Okay. So anyway,
Sharon, Tasha, Bud, Sharon.
You know what, Jimmy, I just want to validate what you're saying there, that how you approach that it's not unrealistic that at times people think that they can't say no, and that there's not an education piece that needs to happen to the public about what their rights and responsibilities are in their interactions with police. I hesitate in the fact that should be entirely a responsibility of the officers who are working the street, specifically when we're talking about the lack of trust. So I think as this committee moves forward, we need to find ways that this committee can involve the community in educating itself on what its rights and responsibilities are, specifically because the community lacks the trust from the police. So why should a community member believe what a police officer is telling them? Because what I'm hearing back from everybody here is they don't. So why are we making rules that are putting it on our patrol officers to do that education? I think that should really be on other people. But I agree with you that that's an important piece, and there's no doubt that there are people out there who would feel like they wouldn't have the right to say no. And again, I'll go back to what I said earlier.
Time's up, Tasha.
Yeah, times are changing, and the way we communicate is changing. So.
Okay, Bud.
So I agree with much of what Tasha's saying, that there is a general drift to many of these recommendations. They are very much related to each other. And I think what we're hoping PPB will see is that we're asking to move from a model where we are more like occupiers who do something to a community member. We search them with consent. We ask them questions. We do this to them, to a model of doing things with them, as you are describing, where community policing leads us back almost to the time that Vince Elmore once described me, where police relied upon leadership in the community to help them identify the problem actors in their midst. And so it's not a fast process. It's not going to happen overnight. But we do want to see movement back towards community policing, and we think this helps.
All right, I remember Sharon.
So I think this is actually a really valuable discussion that we're having and is directly aligned with our function as the COAB. I think we're really identifying where there's a disconnect and where it's communication and perception differences between the community and the police. So the key is identifying how the community would best receive this information from the police, whether that is a written card. And I would love if there are community members here to step up and say how you would like to get that kind of information, whether it's a card. I can't think of others off the top of my head, but it's clear this communication, one side feels like it's happening, the other side doesn't, and so how do we make it so that there's actual communication in the situation? So I would suggest there's a reason. I'm going to make a motion then. I move that we continue with the consent, that we don't abolish or recommend abolishing the consent searches, but that there is effective communication to people if they are subject to these, whether in written. No.
Okay. This proposal is what is before
right,
us.
but the proposal is a little.
Okay.
You
can vote against this proposal?
It says if not. Yeah, I'm reading this proposal, and it says the PPB should prohibit consent searches if
My
they are
point
not
is,
prohibited.
this is the proposal that we're voting on. If you have something else that you want, that needs to come in another form. This one gets voted up or down, as it is.
It's just part of the proposal also says if they're not prohibited, they should require to use written forms for consensual searches. So that's sort of saying two things. So
if you want to vote against the proposal, that's fine. But if you want to make an amendment, you can make an amendment. But please be really specific. I'm pushing because of time.
Okay.
Rabbi Kahana?
The amendment would be to strike the first sentence and the first phrase of the second sentence.
The first sentence is the PB should prohibit consent searches.
The next phrase, if consent searches are not prohibited, and continue with.
So the proposal, the friendly amendment to the proposal would read, the PPB should require its officers to use written forms for consensual searches signed by the person being searched in advance of the search, which contains advice to the person about the right to refuse to consent without being subjected to any adverse consequences. That's the friendly amendment to the chair of the Use of Force Committee.
It's not a friendly amendment. I think I could speak for the subcommittee that opposes that amendment.
Okay, so the amendment is
I second the amendment. How does it work in terms of
motion after this amendment?
Okay. Okay. Got it.
Okay, so we're voting on the amendment at this point in time, right? Is that what we're doing?
No, because it wasn't accepted.
I thought you had a motion and.
Yes, but it wasn't accepted by
Tom, okay. It wasn't accepted as friendly, huh?
Oh, I see.
Yes, I know. That's what I thought anyway. If you want to vote on this amendment, you can vote on it. Okay. If you have a motion and a second, and we'll vote on the amendment first.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Are you ready?
Sharon's amendment? Is that what you're speaking to? Okay.
That is the rejected as a friendly amendment. Okay. But if they can get, and there is a motion and a second to vote on the amendment, you can vote on the amendment. Okay? All right. What you have is a proposal. Then you have an amendment to the proposal that you would like, some people would like to see, which is an abbreviated form of the initial proposal. Okay?
That the abbreviated version would strike the language, the PPB should prohibit consent searches?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay?
I'm clear now.
So you're voting on the abbreviated version, which starts with, the PPB should require its officers to use written forms.
The proposal that comes from the committee before you go to any other proposal.
Okay. There is a motion on the table at this point. Yes, bud?
I just move that you make a decision and that we'll live with it.
My decision is, huh? All right, I'm going to say it again. The amendment was not considered friendly and therefore not accepted. Okay? The original proposal had not yet been moved or seconded. Well, I'm sorry, there's a motion on the floor at this point. The motion on the floor is to accept or reject the amended version of this proposal. I am now going to call for a vote. I'm calling for a vote. All in favor of the abbreviated form of this proposal, please raise your paddles. Or of abbreviating this proposal. All right. There are 2 in favor. All opposed, please raise your paddles. 3, 6, 8. All abstaining. Amy abstains. You're going to abstain. Okay. All right. So your proposal lost. We're going back. We're going back to the original proposal. Can I have a motion? All right. All in favor of this proposal, as written here on this page, please raise your paddles. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All against this proposal? 2. All abstentions? 2. We don't need 8 to pass, do we? Do we? Do we have it? What is B doing? We're waiting to hear from B. Is she coming through? This is difficult. You need.
Major action.
Yes, Tom.
Did V vote?
That's 8. The proposal passes. Whew. All right. Thank you. You're wonderful. Great job. Yes. Okay, we have public comment at this point in time, and I have the names here. Please be advised that your comments are limited to 3 minutes each. Anisha Burkhan. If you'd come to the mic here, that's in the middle of the floor.
I was talking with my colleague, Lieutenant Rick Leland. Hi, everyone. I'm Anissa Furkan. I'm here from the Oregon Assembly for Black Affairs. I live in Salem, Oregon, and we have been working off of the 2014 Oregon Black Political Convention platform and resolutions, community policing, homeland security issues and social justice issues. I'm proud to be here this evening with Jared from the DOJ and his sidekick, what's your name? Brian. Brian from Washington, D.C. I've been in, well, actually, you don't want to hear about my story, but having sat here this evening, what I've gotten from your board and what I wanted to share with you is my advocacy for community policing. You guys have done a fine job addressing the issues and concerns of the community. And again, esteemed Lieutenant Rick here and I have been chatting, and we're seeing that there is a breakdown in communications and community awareness, and that means bringing the message of the police, the collaboration of the police to the communities, to the schools, et cetera, et cetera. Keep up the good work, and I feel if you take that message to your churches, to your schools, increase that community interaction, the police department is willing to do that. We have to look at a collaboration instead of a polarization. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan Handelman.
Hi, good evening. I'm Dan Handelman with Portland Cop Watch. And I just want to make it clear that when I was advocating before that you should hold on to your vote, let the public speak, and then vote, I didn't have any particular input at that time. I feel, though, that I'm not the only person in the community, and we're not the only organization in the community, and that there are other people who didn't have time to go to your subcommittee meeting or read the proposals ahead of time. They should have the right to give you some other ideas. It actually ended up feeling a lot like the police had a lot more time to have input during that section than the community, because there was a very long email read and an officer was called up to the microphone to give an opinion. So I just want to make sure that it's fair, and we support all the decisions you made, but I just want to make sure that for future process, you think about that. I understand that Ms. Maxwell resigned yesterday, and I'm not sure whether the only remaining alternate, Maria Medina, was contacted or asked to be here tonight, but I noticed that she's not at the table. I'm glad that Mr. Steenson brought up the contraband issue in the stops data. It does show that about 80% is often that African Americans have contraband on them, even though, as he said, they're searched 3 times as often as white people in this city. If extra training needs to go in for officers to understand the implications of these things that you've done, I think that's very helpful, because it's going to help benefit the community. I think having a card is a great idea. The Bureau currently has a card that many years ago was subject to a lawsuit that suggests that people should consent to whatever the officer tells them to do, and that has not been changed despite the fact that they lost that lawsuit. I just hope that the people in the Bureau notice that, and maybe they'll take that down and change it. We are talking about here Fourth Amendment rights that are in the U.S. Constitution and reflected in the Oregon Constitution. You have to think about people with visual impairment in different languages when those cards are being given out. Our organization is an endorser of an event that's happening on Sunday, this Sunday, the 11th, down in Szymanski Park in the South Park blocks by Salmon Street. It's called Call Out for Justice and the Wars, and Police Accountability is on the platform. Black Lives Matter Portland will be speaking at it, and you're all invited. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Nancy Newell.
Hi, everyone. I'm a 23 member of this community. I'm very active in it. And I do have a serious problem with the number of people that have chosen not to participate further for various reasons. However, some of them are for the very reason of the way the COAB has functioned, and certain people have functioned to discourage their participation. And one in particular just committed suicide last week. He was a veteran with PTSD. His name is Joshua Robinson, and he personally reported to an established person in the mental health community that takes wonderful care of mental health issues and works closely with Street Roots to keep publishing how serious an issue it is and continues to expand in our community. And I know that a lot of these things that Tom and you have been working on addresses parts of that, but there are some serious gaps in what we need to do to better treat people that are facing mental illness. And I'll list the others. Christy Jamison, PCOD appointee and person with lived experience of mental illness. Corey Murphy, person of color and member of the LGBTQI community. Vanessa Gonzalez, a youth leader and person with lived experience of mental illness. Emmanuel Price, HRC appointee and a person of color. Sharon Maxwell, a person of color and a social justice leader. I did testimony at City Council because I felt we were really out of proportion from a position that's key to the operation of COAB, and I intend to pursue that. So it is my understanding that the community liaison, Sadat, has been asked to have a backup plan for the imbalance and perhaps continuing resignations of COAB members, and her response has not been a proactive one, but I'll deal with it when it happens. It's happening. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of very important input for this community. So I would really like that paid attention to. And the other part is it's coming up, and I just want to add it in. I don't know if there'll be time for public comment, but this is about COCL and the second quarter draft. What is the definition of partial compliance, which is the majority of the COCL findings in direct conflict with the DOJ report to Judge Simon? So take that into your next portion consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Teresa Holloway.
Just clarify, did she just say that Joshua had committed suicide?
That's what she said.
Okay, I don't feel like
You want to say something about that, Sharon?
I don't feel like I can sort of just go on and continue like, oh yeah, now let's do the next thing on our agenda when I've just heard about this, and that's shocking and not shocking maybe, but horribly, horribly sad and tragic, and I'm not going to be able to shift away from that. So I don't know. I just had to say that.
What do you need right now? I'd like to finish with the people here and then take the break because they've been waiting to
I think
talk.
we need the break. Yeah.
Okay, and then we'll have the break. Well, she can take a break. I'm understanding the shock, and what I'd like to do right now, I do care about. I think that I want to hear. I don't think so.
How dare you? I think we need to vote.
Teresa Holloway, would you like to come forward and speak?
I'm so sorry.
Laura Vanderley.
I would like to take a moment of silence for the person who committed suicide.
That's good.
Bad customer service is the beginning of excessive force. It's the beginning of oppression. Bad customer service is what you just demonstrated tonight.
I apologize if I've offended anyone. I asked what you needed, and I didn't get a response.
Because it's on your time. Because it's on your time. That's bad customer service. I need to know right now. I need the consent right now. I need to open up your backpack right now. That's the way the police are behaving. That's what you just demonstrated. That's encouraging that behavior.
You want to say something? No, I didn't hear you. Okay. And I apologize, and I have no way else to do anything except to say, I am sorry if I was insensitive or if I ignored something that should have been attended. I am apologizing.
That's the pressure we put on our police. We put that pressure. Do it now. Time sensitive. We do that to nurses. We do that to doctors. We do that to, it's all in all institutions. It's all on the institution's time. We are human beings. This woman is a human being. She needed a moment.
Go ahead, Alicia. Let's take our break. Yes. You have 10 minutes for a break.